So this happened last year, and it's still really on my mind. Here it goes. So one night I had my friend Katie over at my house, and we wanted to go and walk to McDonald's by ourselves. We wanted to spend some time together, and McDonald's wasn't that far away from my house. My mom said we could go, and soon after, we'd started our journey and began walking outside in the dark, heading to the McDonald's. Because I was with Katie, I wasn't really creeped out or anything. Well, we eventually made it to the McDonald's, so we headed inside and ordered. When we got inside, we saw that there was a middle-aged man behind us. Now, it didn't really make us feel uncomfortable. That is, until Katie looked at him for a second, and she pulled me aside, saying that the old man was staring at our asses. I honestly thought she was joking, but she was acting really serious, and she wanted to leave immediately. So for her sake, I decided we would. We left with our food, of course, and to my absolute shock, the man followed us. I was beginning to get really creeped out at this point, and so was Katie. We started speed walking, and the man was as well, telling us hard now. We went from being creeped out and concerned to now completely terrified. It was complete silence until the man then said,
"For young girls, y'all have really nice asses. I wonder what your panty sizes are. I really wish I could give y'all a wedgie."
So at that point, survival mode kicked in for the both of us. We started running as fast as we could, not once looking back. We heard footsteps running behind us too. When me and my friend finally saw the house, we both ran like a bat out of hell, all the way until we were finally on the front porch. And thank God that my mom left the door unlocked for us to get inside, because when we opened the door and looked back, the man was still running after us. And as we looked a little closer, we then saw a knife in his hand. We immediately closed the door. My mom, with a look of confusion on her face, asked what was going on. We told her to look out the window, and she did, and we did too. And to my absolute shock, the man was still outside my house and screaming obscenities at us, still talking about our asses and asking about our panty sizes. He did eventually walk off after that, with the knife still in his hand. My mom was going to call the police, but there was no point once the man left us alone. We told my mom what happened after we went to the McDonald's, and how it all led to this crazy-ass man following us. We were horrified, but we were really glad that we finally made it home safe and sound. A lot of people might think this story is too mild to even be considered scary. But for me and Katie, this is one of the creepiest experiences to have ever happened to us. I really hope that man didn't pull this on any other young girls. But in reality, he probably did.
If you really like my content and want to support me, please like this video and click the subscribe button. It helps me to grow my channel as essential in reaching a wider audience. Most of you watching my videos aren't subscribed to my channel, and that's why my animations can't reach their full potential. They aren't recommended to more people who would surely love my content as much as you do. You can always unsubscribe at any moment. Thank you in advance, and enjoy the rest of the video.
This happened nearly 5 years ago. It was a Friday night in the UK, and a week before my 20th birthday. Also, it was technically a Saturday, because it was a little after 12 a.m. I get paid on a Saturday, and my usual routine was to walk the 10 to 15 minutes to McDonald's to get something to eat. So I walk up, go to order my food, and it declined. I freak out, thinking maybe I haven't been paid, but I had then realized I had grabbed an old card instead of my new one. I went in a huff basically, and made the long trek home. By the time I had gotten back and procrastinated for another half an hour, it was about 2:30 a.m. I was determined, however, to get food. I again started the walk back to the McDonald's. Now, there's a huge field behind my flat, mostly used for football or dog walking. It was my shortcut that really took the 10 minutes off of my journey. So I'm walking across the field, listening to music in my headphones, and then bang. Out of nowhere, I had fell to the floor in a complete daze, ears just ringing, and I couldn't really make out what was happening. As my vision came into focus, I saw this tall, skinny dude standing over me. What must have happened was he must have either punched or kicked me right in the back of my head. I have no idea why, and I'd never seen him before. He wouldn't say anything, and I was just repeating, "What have I done? I don't know you," over and over again. Then he said,
"Take off your pants."
and that was it. Survival mode kicked in, and this time I chose both. I had somehow managed to get up to run, but I felt something snap in my leg. I fell back down, and he proceeded to try and strangle me. I scratched his face, and I actually got up. I didn't care about my leg. I was 5 minutes away from home. I ran, and I'd seen him run toward me for like 2 seconds before then giving up. I ran like hell to get home, and when I finally made it home, I cried into my mom's arms while following a police report. I also did a lineup, but I wasn't able to identify anyone, as it was pitch black, and I haven't seen him since. But I still have anxiety about where I live, as the police said he might actually live in my area. Be safe out there, but also don't let people scold you for wanting McDonald's at 3 a.m. Just because you're hungry or wanting to walk or whatever, that doesn't justify people blaming you for your assault. You have the right to walk the streets and feel safe, regardless of the time. I'm a male, and I was around 8 or 9 when this happened. Obviously, I don't really remember that much since I was a kid. But anyways, I was recently asked by my mom what I remembered about this day. My mom was taking my sister and I to go see a movie. We decided to stop at a McDonald's to kill some time. There was a strange guy wearing a purple suit who had followed us in and sat at a nearby table without ordering anything. After we finished eating, I got up to clean my retainer in the bathroom sink. The man had followed me into the bathroom and then stood between me and the door. He asked if I wanted a juice box. I told him no, but he told me I needed to go out to his car with him so I could pick out a flavor. My parents had always drilled into my head to never go with a stranger, so I had immediately knew what was happening. I ran right past him and out the bathroom door into the lobby, and I had then told my mom what had happened. He followed me out and he had started coming towards us. My mom then stood up and started making a really big scene in the McDonald's. She loudly asked him why he was trying to get her son to go out to his car with him. He said that he was just trying to give me a juice box, and he then hurriedly left, then got into his car and drove off. Luckily, there was a police car in the parking lot, so we waved down the cop and we told him what happened. Unfortunately, the man in the purple suit was gone by this point. I had forgotten most of what happened before and after the incident, but I still vividly remember the terror I felt being alone in the bathroom with him blocking the door. It was only 10 to 20 seconds, but I'll never forget that uneasy feeling. I'm really grateful that my mom was such a rock star and knew to make a scene to scare him off. No idea what would have happened if I had gone out there with him. Be safe out there.
This happened to me when I was 19 at my local McDonald's back in 2009. I've done tons of under-the-table stuff like a bouncer, a babysitter, and even a waiter. These were all jobs that were simple enough, and I figured working at McDonald's would be no different. I had worked the early morning shifts with one of my coworkers named Emma. Sometimes we'd have to get there at really early hours of the morning to get everything set up. One morning, I arrived to work a bit earlier than usual as I was the one with the keys and wanted to get a head start. As I'm getting out of my car, I notice a woman in a raincoat standing by the front door holding a bag. She immediately asks if we were open, and I politely tell her no and that she'd have to come back later. She gives me this upset frown and walks away in anger, just like a child would when they can't have a toy. It was weird, but there were a lot of weird people in the area at the time, so it wasn't uncommon. I go inside and Emma comes in shortly after to help refill sauces and napkins so that we could get ready to open. It's around 3:15 a.m. and Emma and I are wiping down tables when I see the woman from before looking inside with this menacing grin. I was shocked to see her, and so was Emma. "Abby, who is that?" she asked. I tell her that I didn't know and that she was probably just waiting until we opened. We finish wiping down the tables and we're ready to open, but our policy states that we couldn't open until the given time, which is 4 a.m. in Canada. With basically nothing left to do at this point, we go to the back and play some games on our phones when I hear a loud crash. I see that the front glass door is now shattered and the woman from before is stepping inside with a hammer. I tell Emma to hide while I grab the bat we kept under the counter, yelling at her to leave. She refuses to comply and she comes charging at me with the hammer. Expectedly, she misses me while falling to the floor, giving me and Emma time to get out. We are outside on the phone with the police and the woman is still inside damaging things while screaming. The nearest police station was only a few blocks away, so they were able to come within a matter of minutes. Now this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. We see a police cruiser pull up to the McDonald's and 2 police officers step out. One of them being male and the other one female. They go inside and they're instantly met with the deranged woman face to face. By now, they're ordering her to drop the hammer and she's screaming louder than I heard before. The woman charged at the female officer with full force and knocked her out cold. The male officer then tases the woman and she suddenly stops screaming. After a while, there were several police units on standby and an ambulance for the badly injured officer. Turns out, this woman is a violent schizophrenic and hasn't been taking her meds. She's been in and out of jail several times for assault and battery, as well as theft. She's extremely messed up in the head and was taken to a mental institution to get the help she needed. The McDonald's remained closed for about a week after that, with my manager allowing us to get paid during that time. This is by far my scariest incident that's ever taken place during my time working at McDonald's. I've had other experiences, but this one takes the prize.
I had just turned 16 years old a week prior, and it was my 5th month working at this restaurant, and I was doing really good. I had just gotten a raise, I was friends with my coworkers, and I was thoroughly enjoying my job. I eventually got put on a closing shift, since now I was old enough. I was working with my friend Jason, as we always had a good time at work. I was working the drive-thru, and he was at the front counter. We had our usual dinner rush, and after that, we had a few customers that would pop in and out. I was walking over to the Frosty machine to fill up someone's Frosty when I saw Jason talking to a customer. Now, a little background. Jason had a drive-thru headset on. This was because when things got less busy, the sandwich maker also does the front counter until we close the lobby. So Jason had this younger adult male customer. I had noticed that his arms looked like they had needle pricks, as this wasn't uncommon in this area. I told myself that I'd keep an eye on the situation to make sure that the man didn't try to hustle any money out of us. But apparently, he also saw me too. I had finished the Frosty and handed it to the customer when I heard Jason over the headset. "Hey, this dude won't stop making comments about you." I then looked over at him once the customer in the drive-thru had left, and I cocked my eyebrow at him. He said into the headset, "He's saying some really weird things about you and your body. I don't know. It's enough to even make me uncomfortable." I was getting ready to respond to the headset when this man pokes his head above the Frosty machine and then says, "How old are you?" "I'm 16. "Well, I'm 28. my name's Ben." I said hi, and I got back to doing my job. The man kept trying to talk to me though, even when I was on the intercom with customers. He didn't like the fact that I was ignoring him, and he started to yell really awful things to me. Jason got pissed at this, and he told the guy to leave as I sprinted back to the office to go tell my manager what was happening. My manager looked horrified, as he had just turned 18 not too long ago and was just recently made a manager. He walked to the front counter and he told the guy to leave or he was going to call the cops. The man angrily stormed out of the store, but not before he spit on Jason and flipped us all off as he left. My manager asked if we wanted to call the cops, as spitting on someone is assault, but Jason just said that he wanted to finish his shift with no incident, and I agreed. The rest of the night went pretty smooth. Eventually the store was closed and we had finished up cleaning. At this point it was 1 a.m. My manager told me I could go, so I grabbed my stuff, said goodbye to them both, and started to walk out to my car. Now, I didn't ask anyone to walk with me because 1, I didn't want to be a bother. 2, my car was right next to the building. And 3, my car was in a really well-lit area next to a Taco Bell, whose drive-thru line was packed. I exited through the back exit, and I started to walk across the parking lot. Although, as I had walked, I started to get that feeling that I was being watched. I thought that I was just being paranoid, but I still found myself looking at the entrance of the dumpster parking lot. Then I saw the door swing open, and those doors are extremely heavy. Standing there in the entrance of the parking lot was the guy. As I started to book it to my car, I ripped my keys from my bag, dropping my bag in the process, and started to vigorously unlock my car with the button. I heard slamming footsteps behind me. He was charging at me. I just remember my only thought being, I'm actually going to die in a fast food chain parking lot. I slammed into my car as my body wasn't letting me slow down. I swung the door open, jumped in, shutting and locking the door behind me. I looked out the window and saw this man on the ground. He had tripped over my bag that I dropped. Relief rushed over me, but quickly left again and closed the distance between him and my car. He started tapping on my window and pulling the handle to my door. I started to look for my phone when I realized I left it in my bag. I didn't know what to do. His taps were slowly turning into bangs, and I thought he was going to break my window. I could see the anger in his face and a clouded glaze over his eyes. He had blood running down his arm from something. He had stopped banging for a second and stared me in the eyes. I must have looked like a deer in the headlights. I was petrified. That's when he started to bang his entire head on the door. With each bang, it had rattled by the entire car. He was now starting to leave bloody head prints on my window. He had cut his own forehead open from how hard he was banging it. That's when my first good idea of this whole situation came up. I started to blare my horn. This caught him off guard. He had stopped banging, and he looked at the back door of the store. I saw his eyes widen as he booked it off into the empty parking lot and then across the street. I looked out my back window and saw Jason charging in with a salad knife and my manager on the phone with someone. I slowly unlocked my car and opened the door. I went to get up, but my entire body was shaking so badly that I couldn't. Jason told me that our manager was on the phone with the cops and they'd be here soon. I finally felt my body relax. I didn't know that I'd been tensing that hard. Eventually the police showed up, along with my mom. I gave them a statement, and I then went home, with my mom driving behind me. I didn't go into work for almost 2 weeks after that, and even then, they just had me in the back making salads for a while, as they didn't want to risk the man coming in again. The police never called us, and they had never found the guy. All I know is that they had found used needles in a crack pipe behind the dumpster. They didn't know if it belonged to him though. And as previously stated, this happens a lot in this area. I'm just so glad I was able to escape it. These are my stories. I hope you're able to learn from them in some way or another. To all my fast food workers out there, stay safe. And if you're a female worker on a night shift, please have someone walk you out to your car. I can promise you that you're not being overly cautious. Just do it. For some background, I'm a 26-year-old female that spent my childhood living between a semi-big city and a college town. I have 2 older brothers that are 8 and 6 years older than me, and a sister 3 years younger. Before my parents met in corporate America, my dad was a police officer. This is relevant later. From the time I was born until I was 8, my family still lived in my parents' starter home from the 90s. When they purchased the home a few years before I was born, the neighborhood was blossoming, literally. There used to be most well-maintained yard competitions, full of newly married couples having their first kids and families. My granddad lived a block away. Some of the neighborhood kids were my brother's ages, and other neighbors had kids that I'd grow up through my toddler phase with. Before I get into the story, I need to set the stage for how the neighborhood grew with my siblings and me. As we grew up, my brother's friends grew more and more mischievous. There were gangs that controlled the middle school bathrooms, making other kids pay money or take a beating to go in. We had bomb threats from the time I was in 1st grade, and they happened so often that I remember, instead of getting scared, sitting in a field watching my teacher go into a building and just thinking, I really hope she doesn't get blown up today. The neighborhood school slowly added more and more security measures to the point where the fence around the playground looked like a prison yard. The teenagers would break into empty houses and light grease fires, old Christmas trees, etc. When I was 7 years old, my granddad was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. He was in in-home hospice care, and he had a plethora of medications to manage his pain and comfort. He heard a knock on the door, and thinking it was the cable man, told them to come in. To his surprise, a young man my brother's age walked into his bedroom. The teenager sat at his bedside and held pleasant conversations with him, until he picked up several bottles of my granddad's painkillers and left. The teenager was later found passed out in the driveway right across from my granddad's house, and was in an overdose-induced coma last I heard, which was nearly 2 decades ago. Now, the neighborhood McDonald's. Next door, there was a small strip mall with a Subway and a wing house, and the McDonald's parking lot had 2 entrances on opposite sides. Being 7, I requested only a plain cheeseburger in my Happy Meal. This McDonald's had a habit of not following this customization, and since I would refuse to eat it, my parents had to go back through the drive-thru to get another one. On this night, it was already dark, so it was after 8 p.m., and my parents had taken my 4-year-old sister and me through the McDonald's drive-thru. Again, I was 7, so I don't really remember the exact time or why we were at McDonald's so late. I got my Happy Meal, and to no one's surprise, my cheeseburger had all the condiments. Ketchup, mustard, onions, everything. All of the enemies of a 7-year-old. My dad was driving our SUV, and as we turned around the building to go back into the empty drive-thru, a sedan came racing into the opposite side of the parking lot to a swerving stop, and the passenger door flew open. With my dad's calm background, he instinctively knew that this was about to turn into a very dangerous situation. He took a sharp turn and placed our car between the sedan and the opposite exit of the lot, preventing the car from exiting without having to hit the building. Probably not a great move with 2 young children in the car, but his cop instincts took over, and I digress. Within seconds, we saw red and blue lights from all sides and heard sirens wailing and police cars then squealing in. My dad quickly pulled our SUV into a parking spot. Suddenly, the entire McDonald's brick outside and golden arches were totally highlighted red and blue, and officers had guns pointed at the sedan, demanding the driver and passengers to get out. A woman sat in the driver's seat sobbing, and a man jumped out of the passenger seat, gun aimed at the police, using the door as a shield. Another man sat in the back seat, making no movement. Shots were fired on both sides, and the man took off running into the only corner of the lot that contained woods as officers sprinted after him. Multiple officers rushed to remove the woman and the other man from the car, and they had them in cuffs while my dad stepped out of our car to talk to the remaining officers at the scene. The officers informed my dad that the armed man robbed the Subway next door shortly before. The man shot both young female workers, killing one in the store and forcing the other to crawl to the wing house, leaving a trail of blood behind her while she desperately scraped her entire body on the concrete, fighting for her life in any way to get help. She was able to get the hostess to call 911 and eventually recovered in the hospital. I no longer wanted my Happy Meal, as my 4-year-old sister and I cried quietly in the car, while my mom tried to comfort us with a terrified look on her face. We left the situation with the cops and went to go check on my granddad. For the rest of that night, I honestly thought the man was going to find us, and I jumped at any tap in the night. I moved to my college town when I was 8 and attended university there before moving to my post-grad job in New York City. I spent 3 years there and have since moved back to my original hometown. While I live over half an hour away from my parents' old house and that McDonald's, I still get the chills sometimes if I happen to drive by that strip mall.
I've been working at my local McDonald's for 4 years now, and it's one of the most annoying jobs I've ever had. People coming in left and right and through the drive-thru with orders piling up was honestly enough to make the average worker irritated. I sure as hell had to go through it all, and there would even be times where I couldn't finish up customers' orders. If you've ever worked at McDonald's, you get where I'm coming from. This happened around a year ago, right before the pandemic hit, and I was working overnight shift on front counter. I usually work in the kitchen on overnight, so I had no interactions with any customers until then. I was working a 7-hour shift, which was a usual overnight shift for us. It was around 9 p.m. and I had just finished putting in a customer's order when I noticed a man talking to a young boy near the play area. Yes, we were still one of the few restaurant chains that still actually had one. The man is kneeled down to the little boy's height, and right away the boy seemed very uncomfortable. I dismiss it as the boy probably having a rough day with who I assume was his father trying to calm him down. I remained focused on putting in customers' orders and try not to interfere with whatever was going on. Suddenly, the man grabs the boy's arm and they're heading in the direction of the front door that leads out into the parking lot. At that point, I couldn't keep my mouth shut and was about to say something when I hear someone yell, "Hey, what the hell are you doing with her son?" Just then, the mother comes out of the restroom and the man is petrified. His face was pale and his eyes were as big as saucers and tried to cover it up by saying, "Oh, this is your child. I'm so sorry. He looked lost and I was just trying to help him find his parents." His mumbles and incompetent use of wording clearly gave away as to what he was actually trying to do. The mother gave him an uncomfortable smile that had "Stay the hell away from my kid" written all over. Police were called, but I wasn't sure if he was caught or not.